to you by New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity. Hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects from the coronavirus to violence on the streets, to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now. I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the Literary Parrot. People who have been on our show, have participated in this, or have been published on our website, newyorkparrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you, and
Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hello, welcome to New York Parrot's Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. Today we have Dorothy Sheffer. She is the daughter of refugees from Hitler's Germany. Dorothy Sheffer was born and brought up in post-war London. She moved to Israel in her early 20s and has worked as a translator, editor, and writer, both freelance and employed in a major financial institution. She has a BA in Sociology and Economics from the London School of Economics and an MA in Communications from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Now retired from translating, she devotes her time to writing and has published 8 novels to date. They are all available as ebooks in paperback form on Amazon and can be accessed from her website, www.sheffervanson.com. She writes a weekly blog containing reviews of books, concerts, and exhibitions, as well as her travels, general topics, politics, and anything that interests her at the time. She is married to an Israeli physicist and has 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 1 grand dog. She also enjoys painting in watercolors, and her pictures adorn the covers of her books. Nice to meet with you, Dorothy. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you, and I'm glad to be here with you.
Excellent. We'll have a great conversation, I'm sure. Just want to let our viewers know there's a little bit of a sound quality issue, but it's not your computer. It's on our end, so we're going to go forward with the interview. But my first question is, what role does the writer, and this is obviously opinion, what role does the writer play in recording and judging history?
Well, every writer has their own take on the history, on what interests them, what concerns them. I've written my book, and my most recent book is about what Israel was like before the Six-Day War, when it was a small country, a poor country, and struggling to find its way in the world. A year after the events that I describe in the book, which are pretty low-key, of people trying to find their way in life, young people trying to find love, and older people trying to find a way of living and being happy in the world. That was a year later, everything changed. Mm-hmm. The whole country was at war, and after the war ended, Israel had become a different place. It had expanded enormously, incorporated a whole new population, and really didn't quite know where it was going. So my book is a kind of creation of a time and a place that no longer exists, which I lived through and I experienced, and I feel it's worth remembering what life was like then.
When you say the Six-Day War, was that the one in June 1969, I believe?
67.
67. Okay, yeah, I was almost accurate. So, does your background in post-war London, does that ever also work its way into your writings?
It sure does.
Mhm.
Well, for instance, the three main characters in this story. Can I just show you the cover of the book?
Sure.
Here we are. It's called
Excellent.
Ruthless in Zion.
Hmm.
Uh, it's a kind of echo of a poem by Milton called
Hmm.
Samson Agonisti, in
Hmm.
which he describes what Samson goes through after he's captured by the Philistines, if you remember the story of Samson and Delilah.
Hmm.
And one very telling phrase is Samson saying, "Eyeless in Gaza." That's how he was made to be a slave
Hmm.
by the Philistines in Gaza. What was it, a few thousand years ago, but Iris in Gaza sort of echoes, let's say, ruthless in Zion echoes Iris in Gaza in Milton's poem. But
Interesting.
that's just my literary pretensions, I suppose. Um,
Well, of course, that actually has it does refer into it. It kind of gives it a context and meaning as well. So it's not completely pretentious.
I try not to be, but sometimes you can't help
Mhm.
falling into the trap.
Yeah,
Um,
pull little flair and a little pizzazz to the work. I guess you could
yeah,
say.
yeah. But
So. Mhm.
last about London. So there are three main characters. One is a young woman who has come to live in Israel from England,
Mhm.
London, like myself. Another is a very beautiful American PhD student, and another is a youngish man, married man from Australia, who's also doing his MA. And they all find themselves in this situation of being in the history department, struggling to get to grips with the Israeli society, to learn the language. Hebrew is not an easy language if you're an
Mhm.
English speaker. Different characters, different the the sentence that you write from right to left instead of from left to right,
Mhm.
and altogether it's intellectually and emotionally a struggle for young people to be uprooted. But these are people who have done this voluntarily. They
Mhm.
have uprooted themselves for various reasons, whether ideological or marital or financial, and they try to get on with their lives and get to grips with the demands of the academia in Israel at that time.
Interesting. So, on average, how long does it take you to write a full novel?
Well, I've managed to write 8 novels in 9 years.
Oh, wow.
So I suppose it must take me about a year. Some of them were sort of half written before, and I took them and rewrote. But some I just started from scratch because I had an idea or I had characters and I wanted to see how things worked out. And other books were focused on other times in history that I'm aware of
Hmm.
and other characters.
Interesting. So, what subjects most fascinate you as a novelist?
So many things. One of my books is based on an experience I had living in Nebraska for a year
Hmm.
because my husband is a physicist and we went to for a postdoc. You know, after you do a doctorate, you
Hmm.
spend a year abroad at another university. We happened to, we had a family of 3 young children, and we found ourselves in a fairly middle-sized town with a university, which also happened to be the headquarters of the American Nazi Party at the time. And there was some kind of interaction. I've, of course, not described exactly what happened. I've embellished and embroidered and used my imagination. But there was that actual situation, which is an interesting one of a young Israeli family and the machinations of the neo-Nazis in America at a long time ago, not the recent neo-Nazis. This was in the 1980s. I think the book is set in the 1980s.
Interesting. So a lot of your novels are autobiographical, or at least based on your actual experiences.
Nothing is strictly autobiographical.
Right.
I've changed names and places and so on and details. And I've used my imagination. I've changed facts, which I think I'm entitled to do. That's poetic license, isn't it?
Right.
And another book of mine is based on my experience of living in France on and off. And, you know, there are a lot of English expats who go to live in France because they like the way of life, they like the food, they especially like the wine. And I've written a book about what kind of life, what exactly happens when English people who don't know a word of French and don't understand the French way of life decide that they want to live in France, and what happens to them there, how they cope with the various difficulties that they confront, some better, some worse.
So you also have a weekly blog that you do reviews for different artistic and so forth, events and your travels. When did you start that, and what it prompted you to start a weekly blog on those issues and those events?
I think it's been going for about 10 years now.
Oh, wow.
The funny thing is, when my father died about 20 years ago, I wrote an obituary of him for the journal in England that he used to read as a refugee. And they reached out to me and said they would love to have a correspondent in Israel, and would I be prepared to write a monthly column about life in Israel for this journal. And I agreed, and I've been doing that. I don't believe it's for 20 years, let's say 15 years. And because they wanted an article every month, I felt that all the time my mind was working, and I had much more to say than I could restrict to only once a month. So I set up my blog with the help of my son, who is more of a computer expert than I am. And I have a blog, and I just seem to have an awful lot of things to say. I go to exhibitions, I read books, I go to concerts. I have just been on a very interesting visit to the Dead Sea. I have a lot to say about that. That will be in one of my next blogs. And it just seems to be the way my mind works, that things get processed into a 600-word piece once a week.
So what are some of the more popular entries you've done that you've seen a lot of hits for, people looking at them and reading them and commenting? Is there any particular entries that seem to draw a lot of attention for your blog?
I don't know if I can even see that, but I do see that on the first day there's usually about 40 or 50 hits, and then after that it goes down the rest of the week. But what I find particularly interesting is the countries that people who read it come from,
Mm-hmm.
all over the world. I've even had someone from the United Arab Emirates reading it, and Azerbaijan. There's a regular follower in Ecuador, and of course the people who know me in Israel, America, England, do check up on it on a regular basis.
Interesting. So, pretty global audience.
Yeah, I'm very happy about that. I mean,
Yeah,
I try not to be too political because it can get you into trouble. But of course, I do have things to say about the situation in Israel.
Right. It's a very controversial subject worldwide. I think, yeah, it's hard to speak out of things like that.
But what I try to show is the positive side of life in Israel. Life in Israel isn't all fighting and conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, one of the loveliest experiences I've just had at the Dead Sea was in the dining room of the hotel where we were staying. There was an Arab family. I mean, most of the staff are Arabs, but a beautiful Arab lady and her husband and 2 children. And she was so stunning in the way she was dressed, so elegant and so poised. I had to go over to her and tell her how much I admired the way she was dressed. And she seemed very happy to hear it, as of course one should. And there are interactions of that kind. I mean, I don't go out and about an awful lot because I prefer to sit at my computer and do my writing and reading. But when I do go out, it's nice to have these good interactions with other people.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting how many different kinds of people are out there, especially if you're kind of a homebody, and you go out and all these different people are around you, and it's really interesting to meet a lot of different people and different cultures and attitudes and all that. It's really fun, and that's what makes life interesting, at least from my perspective, is meeting all kinds of people and their various different ways they've lived their lives and experiences they've had. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to get out of one little bourgeois compartment and mix with other kinds of people. In Israel is a real melting pot. I suppose, like America, it's a country of immigrants, and a lot of cultures and a lot of cuisines, different kinds of foods and cooking, and makes for a very interesting life.
Yeah, interesting. Cosmopolitan. Yeah, that's really neat. It's good to have a lot of people around you that are different and give you perspective and help you grow in your own self-knowledge. What moral do you think could be derived from your body of work? If you had to pick like a few lessons that would be taken from your writings, what do you think you would say?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. I don't know. The world is full of different kinds of people with different takes on life, and everybody has their own angle and their own experience, their own hang-ups, and their own destiny. Not everybody wants the same thing in life.
Right. They're all traveling on their own trajectory and just kind of seeing what happens, I guess, and learning a little bit as we go from other people and things going on around us.
One of the things that occurred to me just this last weekend as we were staying in this very comfortable, enjoyable hotel, because I wish my parents could see me now, and especially my grandparents, whom I never met, because well, my grandparents ended up in concentration camps, and that was a terrible, terrible thing to happen.
Right.
And my parents were penniless refugees who came to England with nothing, and built their lives. They were not prosperous, but they made a life for themselves and for me and my two sisters, and were happy. They did their best to make a good life for everybody and be good and be kind to people, never, despite what terrible things they had experienced. And I wish they could see how happy and well cared for we are now in my generation and my children's and my grandchildren's generation. And everybody is doing well and studying, and everybody has a roof over their head. Everybody has food to eat and clothes to wear. And those are the most important things. People forget, people lose sight of how important it is just to the basics in life.
Right. Well, we're going to take a brief break, and then we'll come back with some of your writings and highlight a few passages if you want to discuss those. So enjoy the break.
Watching the New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hi, welcome back. We have Dorothy Sheffer today, and she's going to read a few passages from her work, excellent novel that she's been composing, and hopefully we'll see what her writing style is like. And so whenever you're ready, Dorothy.
Okay, well, I'll read you from this book, Rootless in Zion, which
Rootless in Zion,
focused on the campus of the Hebrew University in the year 1966.
Okay.
Very specific year. Okay, I'm starting with chapter 1. Is this where graduates are supposed to hang out? Cynthia looked up from the book that lay open on the table before her, ready to smile and confirm that this was indeed the place. But her mouth hung open, and no words would emerge as her retina registered the extraordinarily beautiful woman standing in the doorway. The oval face with dark, long-lashed eyes, perfect nose, and full lips topped the tall, willowy figure of the vision in front of her. A halo of jet black hair hung to her shoulders like a shining shield. Yes, it is. Are you a graduate student? You do know that this is the history department, don't you? She managed eventually to blurt out. Yep, said the vision, as the long legs, clad in an elegant dark skirt and blouse, took a step forward, bringing the rest of her perfect figure into the stark seminar room that served as the den of the graduate students at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I'm Batsheva Levinson, the woman said, but you can call me Batty. I'm here to finish my PhD thesis. I've taken a year's leave of absence from Berkeley. Oh, great. I'm Cynthia Bergman. No relation to the great movie director, I'm afraid. Too bad. That would have been a useful contact. The perfect lips produced a wry but charming smile. Cynthia glanced down at her own slight frame, feeling slightly ashamed of her nondescript appearance before venturing to speak to the apparition facing her. And I'm trying to write my MA thesis. Great, what's it about? Well, it's a bit complicated. Cynthia hesitated before deciding to shed her usual reticence and share her thoughts and aspirations with the perfect stranger. It's partly about the Holocaust, but also something personal. Family history, that sort of thing. Wow, sounds interesting. The vision of loveliness draped her body onto one of the chairs in the room, clasped her hands together on the table, and turned her attention to the view from the window. The lawns of the campus, set on the Jerusalem hillside known as Givat Ram, extended to the copse of trees at the edge. The green vista interrupted only by a monumental Henry Moore sculpture of a recumbent mother embracing a child. Excuse me, I'm going to have to... You want me to go on?
If you want to, I think that's a good sample, unless you want to read a little bit more.
Well, I'm getting a bit dry in my throat, and
okay.
I didn't bring myself.
Quite all right. It was interesting. I love the descriptive language and the as there's a little bit of a tension going on between the two characters at the beginning, and it's very intriguing to learn a little bit about what they're doing and what may emerge from their relationship. So it's kind of captures a little bit of the spirit of people meeting from different parts of the world and coming together and kind of learning a little bit about each other and where they're coming from. So that was quite interesting. There's a little bit of intrigue going on there. So thank you for sharing it. So how has traveling broadened your writing in terms of your ability to be flexible in your what you write about? How do you feel about how your travels have incorporated into your work?
Well, I don't know. It just comes about. I've spent time in the States. I have a son living there now, and I've spent time in France, and of course I come originally from England, and I do go back there from time to time, Corona allowing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I haven't been able to go for a couple of years. And well, every situation, every scene, every context provides new material for to write about, to think about.
Interesting. So how has this the COVID crisis, how has it affected Israel and your local communities where you're at right now?
The corona?
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the beginning we were in lockdown for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a very deep-seated and bad psychological effect.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. It makes one wary of other people. You don't want to hear other people. You don't want to be associated with other people. I find that very distressing, and it's made me kind of paranoid in a way. I think it's made a lot of people paranoid.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what we can do about it. We here in Israel, people my age, have all had our third injection, the booster,
Mm-hmm.
and we feel we're kind of immune. But for instance, in the hotel where I've been staying for a few days, everybody had to wear masks all the time, including the staff. And only when you were eating were you able to take it off. And of course, when you're in your room or in a swimming pool, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And outside, walking outside, it's you don't have to wear a mask. But some people do, all the same. The Dead Sea, I don't know if you know about the Dead Sea. It's the lowest place on Earth. It's got a very low pressure, and it's very hot, like all year round. So we spend most of the time in the air-conditioned interior, but early morning and in the evening it's not too hot. Early morning is very pleasant to go out, and they've made lovely places to walk and promenades along the sea. And of course, you've got to go in the sea, but the Dead Sea is not like any other ocean. It's a very high salt content, and people can float in it very easily. People just use it for relaxation. It's got all kinds of medical benefits, not only floating there, but the chemical makeup. I'm not quite sure how it works, but it certainly does work.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So why did you choose to self-publish your work instead of go through a traditional or an independent publisher?
I did try to send my work to agents and publishers around the world. If they answered at all, it would be things like, well, it's very nice, but it doesn't suit our list, or it's not in our publication concept. I got fed up, and it takes an awful long time, and I don't know how much time I've got left. I'm not young anymore. And Amazon gave, or Kindle or whatever, gave this opportunity to publish oneself. You have to overcome a few technical hurdles, layout of the text and so on. And I am a little bit familiar with what has to be done and what a book should look like. I mean, I've read enough books in my time. And getting the, I use my own paintings as cover, for the cover. I had to get my son, my computer literate son, to help me put the cover on Photoshop, to do the Photoshop aspect. But I think on the whole, Amazon is very helpful in that respect.
Yes.
The books come out looking professional, and I'm very happy with the result. I'm not so happy with my sales, but that's partly a question of the marketing that is not my field of expertise, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, not mine either. It's very hard to sell a book, especially since more is going online, and it seems like fewer people are reading in general. It's more reading more blogs and things like of that nature. So when you're reading a book, what captivates you the most in reading?
Characters, mainly, and period. I like historical novels. Actually, at the moment, I'm reading something online about the French monarchy in the 15th century, which is fascinating and brings the period to life in a way I would never have imagined. The author, I'm sorry, I don't remember her name, has done a lot of research and really knows the subject very well. I also read, I'm very fascinated by what happened in the Holocaust. I read a fair amount of Holocaust literature, biographies, autobiographies. And Well, it's important to remember that it happens, terrible things happen, people do awful things, and we mustn't let anything like that ever happen again.
Absolutely. And I don't think any sensible person would disagree at all with that. What would your final message be to our viewers?
By my books.
Buy your books. Absolutely. Take a look at her website. Definitely. That's on our flyer. If anybody's curious about what Dorothy has to offer, then just take a look at the flyer. And there's the blog, the website for the blog, as well as her books. So, is there anybody you would like to thank or give a shout out to in the meantime while we're closing the program?
Well, I'd like to thank you for
Thank
making
you.
this effort on my behalf, and my husband, of course, Yigal, who has been a great support and help and encouragement all these years.
Excellent.
And my whole family, they're wonderful. Children, grandchildren, and granddaughters.
Wonderful. Yeah, family's great, and you have to thank the dog as well. I'm assuming the grand dog. So this has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner, and we had Dorothy Shefer today. And thank you for joining us so much. It's been a pleasant conversation, and I appreciate all the things you've talked about in your book. So I definitely advise people to take a look, at least buy the ebook and give it a read, and let her know what you think. I'm assuming she'd be glad to hear from you, and check out her blog, leave some comments. So if you would like to donate, anybody out there with a little extra money, and you want to donate to the arts and help out with us here at the New York Parrot Literary Corner, you can support us at paypal.me/nyparrot. And we also are looking for guests. So if you're interested in promoting your book and discussing literature and you're a creative mind, either you're a novelist, a poet, short story, short fiction, if you're a musician, we would love to have you as a guest, a painter. We love any kind of creative mind. Contact me at literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. And be advised, my halo is turning green today, a kind of sickly green. So I definitely want to get some guests on this program. I don't want to be too sickly green for too long here. So anyway, and thanks to our viewers. If you have not subscribed to our channel, just hit that subscribe button. Just blink, 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 and it'll inform you when we go live and what we're doing. And you'll be able to participate in the program through comments and questions. So I would like to thank Dorothy for joining us today. And again, our viewers, and be advised, you must have a great afternoon, a great evening. And thanks for joining us today. This is the Parrot Literary Corner. Hi, this is the most amazing collection I have read so far. I'm a reading-aholic. Dustin Pickering, you know me from Parrot Literary Corner. This is the Literary Parrot, available at Amazon.com and its various affiliates. If you have not seen this collection, it's 249 pages of glorious global literature in a contemporary vein. This covers a lot of subjects from the coronavirus to violence on the streets, to love, to romance. Everything you can imagine is in this collection, and you should buy it now I'll tell you why. It's a collection of unique voices from the Literary Parrot. People have been on our show, have participated in this, or have been published on our website, newyorkparrot.com. So please, I implore you, buy a copy. Thank you, and